And this is the last video for the methods section. You have almost made it. Welcome to E Squared Emporium for all things AP Psychology. We're having more fun with research methods. So much fun. Let's talk about covert or overt observation. So a covert, see the word cover in covert? This is undercover. So you do not know you're being observed, and we'll talk about why you might want that in psychology studies. So you have no idea that somebody is observing you. Now, they do have to go get permission. This can't be like a weird stalker thing. We'll talk about that. Overt, see how the O, wide open. This is where you absolutely know that you're being observed, right? Maybe the principal walks into your room and is sitting at the back of the room, administrator. You know that your class is being observed. So there could be a social worker who comes in and watches the class, and you know that you're being observed. So this is wide open, that you know there's an observation happening. So why would we want covert observation? Well, sometimes there are groups that we need to study for psychology research or sociology research, and they don't really want to have outsiders in there. Like street gangs don't really like to have outsiders in there taking notes and recording them. Motorcycle gangs don't really like to have you in there. The Amish or closed cultures who don't really like outsiders. Cults, if you're going to go join a cult and find out what is happening in the cult, you can't really announce that you're a psychologist and that you're doing a study and that you're trying to make a documentary about them. Prisoners generally don't like to be observed. Places like mental hospitals, and we're going to actually look at some studies where they've gone into cults and into mental hospitals, and we'll see what happens. Now, detailed notes may be difficult in this situation for obvious reasons. Can you be sitting in prison taking detailed notes in the corner and think that your cellmate won't notice, right? If you're in a motorcycle gang and you keep saying, hey, would you mind repeating that? It's going to be a little obvious. So trying to record, trying to wear a wire, trying to get detailed notes is going to look a little difficult. We'll see one example, the Rosenhan study in a mental hospital, where he actually did keep detailed notes, and they thought he was delusional and deranged because he was taking detailed notes. They thought he was paranoid. So it can be very dangerous to go undercover in some of these situations for covert observation. And here's the key. You have to get special permission, typically through a university, through the APA. You have to get special permission to do covert observation. This is the one case where you don't get informed consent, which we'll talk about with ethics. You can't go up to, Mr. MS-13 and say, excuse me, sir, but would you please sign this informed consent so I can observe you for the next couple of days, right? You can't get informed consent in a very safe way. So we waive informed consent, but a whole committee has to give you special permission before you can do this. All right, cohort effects have to do with your cohort. A cohort is a group of people who all experience something at the same time. So like we call millennials, cohorts, or baby boomers or cohorts. It is a group that is bonded based on the time period where they're living, the place where they're living, or something in life that they have experienced. We can't recreate this very easily. Like you could not recreate a pandemic, hopefully not. Only those kids who were in school during third, fourth, fifth grade during COVID will have those experiences. You can't explain it. Someday you're going to have children and you're going to try to explain to them what it was like to do virtual school. And you're going to try to explain to them what it was like to wear a mask everywhere you went. And they're just going to look at you like that makes no sense because they did not live through it and they're not going to understand it. The same way that when we hear stories about living through the Great Depression or living through World War II, if you're not a cohort of those times, it's history and it's interesting, but it's not something you have directly experienced. So this may influence our results. If you, for instance, were a firefighter during 9/11, you're going to have a very different reaction than, say, a World War II vet or the example I gave, kids who had to take their end of the year test during COVID. So that's a cohort. So sometimes we just test a cohort, and sometimes being a part of a cohort can change the way you answer questions. Meta-analysis is when we analyze all the results of all the other studies, and this can be global. This picture down in the bottom, the chart, I should say, that's actually a global study of what used to be called Twitter, now X. And these are all the messages globally that happened based on time of day and the mood. Notice it was positive tweets and negative tweets, and positive tweets were the highest on a late Saturday night, and positive tweets were the lowest on a Tuesday afternoon. So looking at positive words and tweets versus the time of day and looking at the mood. That was a meta-analysis. So sometimes we all can conduct a study and then you get the results from Canada and Zimbabwe and Brazil, and you bring all the studies together and you can compare the data. It's massive. It could be 800,000 or more, right? The Twitter X study was probably huge. So meta-analysis is analyzing all the results of all the other studies and bringing them all together. Peer-reviewed. You're going to hear this a lot. That is this study peer-reviewed? All your research must be peer-reviewed. When you go to college and then go on to your master's and your doctorate degree, they have a term there called publish or perish. You need to be publishing your research. And if not, you kind of perish from the academic world. And peer-reviewed means that you write about it, you give it to other scientists. There's an entire process. It gets published in journals. People review it. People might try to copy your study, and then they either agree or disagree, and they give you back feedback. It's an entire peer review process. It's a loop. And then once it has been established that we agree, enough people have reviewed it, it is now considered to be sound science. It is now considered to be science that you can really base your evidence on. You can say, oh, this is peer reviewed. So it's really good science. It's really good evidence. There are some challenges to what happens in clinical research. Let's briefly go through these challenges. Wording. Wording can make a huge difference. How your questions are worded makes a difference, especially in interviews and in surveys. We've got to be really careful about the words that we use. For instance, if you ask someone, do you think we should give aid to the needy? Or if you ask them if we should increase welfare spending, you're kind of saying the same thing, but people will be very negative to increasing welfare spending, but they would be much more positive to helping out someone in need. If you ask people, do you believe in gun safety or gun control? Nobody likes to be controlled. People will not approve gun control, but they do think guns should be safely stored and safely kept. So safety sounds reasonable. If you say prayer in school is not allowed or prayer in school is banned, do you see the difference there? Again, just it's splitting hairs, but nobody likes to be banned. Don't tell me it's banned because then I'll go do it more, right? But if you say it's not recommended or it's not allowed, you might get some pushback, but not as much as the word banned. So here's a list down below that says some of the ones I just said. If you say undocumented workers versus illegal aliens, you're going to get a different response in the same survey. If you say revenue enhancers, what you're really saying is taxes, but nobody likes taxes and no one wants their taxes increased. If you say enhanced interrogation or torture and waterboarding, you're going to get a really different answer. And if you say that something was pre-owned or pre-loved versus it's used, used sounds like it's like all used up, right? It's all used up and there's nothing left. Why would you want to buy it versus pre-owned? So wording can really make a difference. So we'll see some examples of this in class. Here's some really bad surveys. Here's a poll. Do you like dogs? Yes or no? And no, I'm stupid. So that's not really giving us any details or any information that's actually going to help us, and it's obviously not scientific. And here's another one. I'm looking for a good book recommendation. Yes or no? Well, what does that tell us? There's nowhere in this survey that you can actually recommend the book. You can only say yes or no and question mark. So I don't know what book you're recommending to me. You just said question mark. 38% said question mark. In this survey, 25% said yes, but I have no idea what book they're recommending because there was no place to put the recommendation. So these are really poorly worded, really bad surveys. So social desirability bias. How do we remember this one? See the word desire and see the word social. We all desire to be liked socially. That's how we remember social desirability bias. People want to present a very positive picture of themselves. They want to be generally liked, especially by a stranger on the street who's asking you questions. You want to be liked. This is just human nature. So we may not tell the whole truth. We tend to answer happier, we tend to answer healthier, and we tend to answer less prejudice than we truly are. We want to be helpful face to face. We want to be liked face to face. We want to seem desirable. They found that adults will say that their marriage is happier than they actually feel at times. People will, answer the way that they think that you want because they want to be liked. So subjective self-reporting kind of goes along with that. If it's an interview or a survey or a questionnaire and you get to answer about yourself, well, we rarely say, yes, I'm having tons of anxiety. Yes, I'm extremely depressed. Yes, I'm an extremely negative person. We tend to not say that. We are overly positive of ourselves. We kind of hype ourselves up a little bit to the other person uh, in the way that we want to be viewed. And we see this especially in celebrity interviews. We are either the hero of our story or we're the victim of our story or both. So when you're taking this kind of detailed information from a participant, you have to kind of keep that in mind. If they're sounding overly perfect or overly traumatized, or either the victim or the hero, and you're like, well, again, it's subjective, and you're self-reporting. So here are some examples. 92% interviewed said they do wash their hands every time they go into a public restroom. But researchers actually observed over 6,000 people in four major cities, and they found that only 77% of people wash their hands. So somebody's lying. Somebody is self reporting that they wash their hands more than they actually wash their hands. So more women actually wash their hands was part of the study. 88% of women actually wash their hands, and only 66% of men wash their hands. So the moral of this story is please wash your hands with soap. But we do subjectively self-report that we are healthier and cleaner than we actually are. Demand characteristics is when we can subtly change our behavior when we're being watched. Subtle cues that the interviews may give us, nonverbal cues, clearing of their throat, eye contact or no eye contact, or smirking, or whatever it is that the researcher is doing, may cause people to behave in ways that they believe the interviewer wants them to behave. You know this if you've got a teacher who's like staring over your shoulder while you're taking a test or doing a homework assignment, you kind of get the feeling if you have the right or wrong answer, right? Or you say something out loud in class and you can look at the teacher's face and they give you a nonverbal cue as to whether you got that right or wrong or you completely mispronounced the word. So those are demand characteristics. We tend to want to behave in ways that please the interviewer or please the researcher or please the teacher. All right, and that's it. So we are completely done with methodology. And now you are prepared for class, but please wait there and don't do any more. We will do the rest together in class.